Robert Pape, with everything that's going on with Iran at the moment, the US-Iran war, and everything that I've learned from you in the two previous conversations we've had on the Diary of a CEO, I'm guessing that you're not really surprised by what we're seeing now.
No, I'm not. I've been modeling the bombing of Iran for 20 years. The fact is the modeling has held up. And literally month by month by month, when we were first here, the big surprise for most people was that we bombed the regime in Iran and it still stood. It survived, even though we killed the supreme leader and something like 137 of their top leaders. Think about that. So that would be like if somebody killed our president, his wife, the first lady, members of the first family, half of the cabinet, all of the leaders in the Pentagon, all of the leaders in the CIA, and about a third of the Congress. That is what we did to Iran in those opening weeks in March. And nonetheless, that regime survived. And that was something that modeling showed for that 20 years. That was based on substantial patterns in history where air power alone had never toppled a regime, going all the way back to World War I. Most people had not really heard that before. Many people, even in the military, did not fully know how much President Trump went up against the weight of history. Then we shifted. We shifted to 6 weeks of a bombing campaign. And then what did we do? We shifted over to a 2-month blockade. Well, that was another version of punishment. So
the US said that they were going to block the Strait of Hormuz, basically trying to take control of it themselves.
That's right.
And therefore kind of punishing the rest of the world.
Well, they didn't want to punish the world. That did happen, but what they wanted to do was punish Iran. So they were trying to coerce Iran to get the government to surrender control of Hormuz. So keep in mind, what happened is on February 28th, that regime change bombing happened and it went on for a few days. But by March 2nd, March 3rd, Iran controlled Hormuz. Literally within a few days, the ships stopped cold. And they basically have not reopened except for teeny tiny periods of time in a modest way. And then you're stuck. How do you get Iran to give up control of Hormuz, or do you let Iran continue to control Hormuz for as far as the eye can see? That's been the dilemma we've been in, Stephen, since really the first week in March. And now it's become clearer to the world. That is the core dilemma. We're at a fork in the road. Either we physically take Hormuz back, all those other tactics, even the MOU didn't work, didn't get
the MOU,
the memorandum of understanding,
which was I sat here with JD Vance and he told me that they were about to sign an agreement with Iran to ultimately end the war. And they had that agreement.
Yeah.
JD told me that it was about to be signed. A couple of weeks later, here we are. They're back to bombing each other.
Yeah, there's really two big issues with this, Stephen, with the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding. I do believe that Vice President Vance sincerely thought it was going to had a good chance of ending the war. But there's a big problem here, Stephen, which is when you listen to Vice President Vance, he approached this as a business deal. So he kept talking about all the benefits that were going to come to Iran if they performed. Fee for service. We want the Strait open, and we're going to offer you money in different ways if you will open the Strait. Well, this is just a fundamental misunderstanding of international politics. This may work great in real estate. I'm not saying it doesn't. But in a major war like this, what's at stake is the balance of power. The balance of power. Now, I want to explain that before the war started, there was a balance of power where America was ascendant, Israel was the rising power, and Iran was actually the declining power in the region. What happened almost within, again, 2 weeks of the war starting is the balance of power was shifting dramatically. When Iran became in control of Hormuz, this represents tremendous power in the future. That wealth, all of the potential, that even though it hadn't been realized yet, equates to not just money to put in coffers, but it equates to military power. It equates to the ability to influence other states in the region, to build a sphere of influence. This is power in terms of major power politics that was shifting here. And so with the MOU, as you look at the MOU, J.D. Vance appears, we could just look at it, he appears to have thought this was a business deal. So he appears to have thought, we're going to hold up the promise of, say, $300 billion. It will eventually fall on you if you will just agree to do what we want and behave. Those aren't the clauses that matter to Iran. The clauses that mattered to Iran were the clauses which directly relate to the balance of power in solidifying Iran, its control of Hormuz. And essentially, this MOU is fundamentally a roadmap to Iran becoming the regional hegemon.
Hegemon? What does that mean?
The most dominant state in the Persian Gulf in the Middle East.
Wait, so you're saying that this agreement would make them the most dominant state in the Middle East?
Absolutely.
So why wouldn't they sign it within a heartbeat?
They did. They did. Iran signed. In fact, most of these points were exactly the points that President Trump said he would never sign in April when Iran presented the initial 14-point plan in April.
So
why are
we back at war then?
Well, let me just explain. The key things that happened here is that, number one, notice in Article 5, it says that Iran will make the arrangements with Hormuz, that is the ships with Hormuz, and it will not charge for 60 days. It doesn't say it will never charge. It says only 60 days. So think about that this is already written into the agreement that President Trump is signing. And then if you say, well, what's going to happen down the road? It's going to be Iran and Oman who are going to determine the future fees. There's no mention here of the United States. There's no clause to even let the United States wiggle itself in. This is a perfectly clearly written clause, and this basically gives Iran control of the Strait of Hormuz and also of the discretion to set the fees for as far as the eye can see with no constraint whatsoever.
How do we know that this is the actual document?
Because both the Iranian government and the White House put out exactly the same document, word for word, so that we can actually compare them literally word for word. So this is exactly the document that President Trump signed. There's no question that we have like an earlier draft. Now, there were some earlier drafts leaked by Bloomberg. That's not what this is. This is the final one. But let me go a little bit further here, Steve. So here we're talking about the strategic base of Iran. And keep in mind, controlling Hormuz means controlling 20% of the world's oil. That's a fantastic amount of wealth and strategic power to build on in the future. No Limit says that nothing about it, you can't spend it on missiles, anything else. But up here with Lebanon, the first article. So here.
So when you say article, this document contains 14 different points. And when you
14 different points. And there are 3 points that are really the critical action points that matter here. This promise of $300 billion down the road, this is so far, this is like holding out funny money to the Iranians. These are the things that are actually short term because this is happening now.
So point one, you're saying.
Point one I want to come back to, Stephen, because I want to explain. This is Iran's strategic base.
Point number 5.
Point number 5. But what happens to become the dominant power in the region? You need more than a strategic base. You want a sphere of influence. You want a sphere of influence here. And can we?
So I'll hold this up here.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Point number 5 is controlling the Strait of Hormuz. But many of the different countries, including Saudi Arabia, the have already started to have pipelines to bypass the Strait of Hormuz. There were plans to do this for years. They were too expensive, but almost immediately they started to do that. So the Saudi Arabia started to put out 4 to 5 million barrels of oil a day starting in mid-March into the Red Sea on a pipeline that had already been built and hadn't been used. There's a little area here called Fujairah, which is where the UAE had a pipeline. That's almost 2 million barrels a day. So 20 million barrels a day were going through Hormuz. Almost immediately, 7 million were being bypassed. Then there's all this discussion that Iraq might build some pipelines. There might be other pipelines here going through Syria. So what if you're Iran? You now control this, but notice it's a declining asset that way. If you only control Hormuz within 5 years, good chance your power is going to be whittled away. What you want to do is you want a sphere of influence. So what Iran started to talk about is their security resistance belt, where they wanted to control. And they said from the Mediterranean to the Red Sea to the Gulf. This was the leaders of the Revolutionary Guard. And why would you do that? Because you want to prevent all of those bypasses to Hormuz and they're already happening. And where's the key one? You already have the Houthis down here. You have Hezbollah here, but you want to make sure the Houthis are pretty secure right here.
So just again, for the people that can't see.
Yeah.
So you're saying the Houthis are pretty secure where?
The Houthis are pretty secure down here in Yemen. They've been fighting with the Saudis for quite some time. They've held their own. We fought a war with the Houthis in May 2025 to try to get them to pull back from a temporary shutdown of the Red Sea, and we lost essentially. So we couldn't beat them. But the big one that was at issue was Lebanon, and my point is, it's not so much that they love Hezbollah. They do, of course. They've had long time, decades of relationships with Hezbollah ideologically. There's good reasons for that, but there's something else that's a power reason that's being ignored here, which is you want Hezbollah to have drones right here in Lebanon. So if there's a pipeline that comes out here through Syria, if you've got some other pipelines that are coming out here, you've got Hezbollah here that can act as your Houthis. They can actually attack the shipping. So now you have you're Iran. You're a major power. You're the dominant power in the region. You don't just control this area here and
the Strait of
Hormuz and Iran itself. You have an arc, a security arc here that is a sphere of influence, but it's an operational sphere of influence. This is not just a piece of paper or something to talk about. This is what's guaranteeing you control all of that oil, whether the oil from the Persian Gulf comes out through Hormuz, whether it comes out through Syria, or whether it comes out through the Red Sea. And that's what Article 1 is about.
So how come...
That's what I'm saying is not, when I listen to Vice President Vance, which I listened to your interview and other interviews, a super smart guy, okay? This is not a matter of that, okay? But he's thinking of it as a business deal. We want Hormuz open. What's it going to take to pay? They're not looking at that. They're looking at, they want to be a regional hegemon. This is their roadmap, and that's why they stuck to those goals.
But they signed this document, but then the war has kicked off anyway, again.
Because what happened is President Trump signed the document. He owned the document for a day. He explained that he signed the document because this was literally 4 weeks ago, because the world was going to run out of oil in 4 weeks, and he wanted to open Hormuz. So President Trump saw this as a way to try to open Hormuz. But what happened immediately after President Trump signed the document, literally starting in the next 48 hours, is President Trump and his administration started to undermine the document, violate the clauses in that document. So issue number one was Secretary Rubio establishing a framework accord agreement in Lebanon, which essentially would lock in Israel's military presence in Lebanon as far as the eye could see. Whereas Article 1 in the document says that the United States would guarantee the territorial integrity of Lebanon, which everybody would realize would mean Israel is violating the territorial integrity of Lebanon. It's not ensuring it. So that would mean Israel can't be locked in there and still be faithful to Article 1. So the framework agreement immediately violates Article 1. The second thing that happened, and this happened shortly after the framework accord, is President Trump started to encourage passage through the Strait of Hormuz, through the southern, there's 3 routes through the Strait of Hormuz. The central route, which used to be in existence, the main route before the war, now that's where the 80 mines are, so nobody's using the central. They're either passing through the southern avenue, which is the one close to Oman, or they're passing through the Iranian passage, which is, of course, near the coast of Iran. And what President Trump did is he started to encourage this passageway, ships to bypass or pass through Hormuz on the southern passageway, but with no coordination with Iran, with no, even often with their transponders turned off. In fact, President Trump was bragging about this as his secret way to sort of bypass Iran's control of the Strait of Hormuz. He literally bragged about this on multiple posts on Truth Social. Well, that directly contravenes Article 5. And then the third thing that happened is, if you look at, we haven't looked at Article 11, but if we look at Article 11, you would see that Iran was due to have some of its frozen assets, some of its assets that were seized by the United States and have been held for decades, unfrozen. And there's a specific sentence which gives Iran the exclusive right to determine what's going to happen with that money. And what President Trump said is they can have their money, but only if they give it to the farmers, the U.S. farmers, and buy American grain. That's the third violation of the MOU. So what happened here, Stephen, is President Trump owned the MOU. And was faithful to it for at least a day, maybe two. And this represented a strategic defeat for the United States. And he even explained why he accepted that strategic defeat very clearly and forthrightly. I call that owning the loss. He owned the loss for about a day or two. But then he tried to reverse the loss almost immediately, Stephen. And that's how we're back at war. Because the big miscalculation that happened in this period was assuming that if President Trump didn't restart the war would be over. Who started the war? Who started to shoot the ships in the Strait of Hormuz? It was the Iranians. Why did they do that? Because we were violating the MOU, bypassing their control of the Strait of Hormuz, and that means preventing Iran from becoming the regional power, the rising regional power, ultimately the regional hegemon. So this is why they violated. It wasn't so much a legal understanding. This is great power politics, Stephen. Iran wants to be the dominant state in the region. The United States does not want Iran to be the dominant state in the region. That is what this war has been about since the first week in March, and now it's 5 months later, and we're still at that point.
Did Iran charge people to go through the Strait of Hormuz before this?
No, never did.
Did they control the Strait of Hormuz at all?
Well, before the war started, not at all. Before February 28, Iran did not control the Strait of Hormuz. What Iran did is it moved from survival to ambition. So Iran saw there was an opportunity with the bombing because the United States had we didn't even have our Navy here. There was no means whatsoever to sort of offset this Iran's control of the Strait of Hormuz. Nothing at all. Iran took this as an opportunity, and the opportunity was to seize power.
So is it fair to hypothesize that actually this war might have strengthened Iran because now it has this control over energy on a global basis that it didn't have before?
Without a doubt, Stephen. I don't say this with any happiness. There's really no question at this point that Iran is stronger today than it was before the war started on February 28th. And that's because it controls the Strait of Hormuz, meaning that it can threaten at will virtually any ship that goes through the Strait of Hormuz. It's demonstrated this over and over and over again. Even when the ships turn off their transponders, they are still able to threaten ships as they go through. And every time a ship tries to run the gauntlet, they run into a drone, mine. They run into basically Iran's barrier. And that is Iran's power.
There was a tweet that went viral this week about this. I'm going to read the tweet here. It says, "I'm confused. The US has the most powerful military on earth. We've bombed the hell out of Iran for 4 months. Trump says their Air Force, Navy, and nearly all of their missile capabilities are destroyed. So how is Iran still capable of hitting US bases right now?"
Because only a small fraction of its drone arsenal is necessary and missile arsenal in order to inflict that damage. Iran entered this war with thousands, we think tens of thousands of drones, ballistic missiles, anti-shipping missiles, which are lower sea-skimming cruise missiles. And even though we have destroyed large fractions of their missiles, they have plenty left over to hit these targets because they're doing saturation attacks. They're essentially doing swarms. They're saturating our defensive capability, and the drones and missiles that get through, plenty enough to damage it to the point we can barely use it if at all.
So is it mainly drones that they're using at the moment to conduct these attacks on the Strait of Hormuz and on US bases?
It's been a combination. In March, it was mostly intermediate range ballistic missiles and then drones. Since about the middle of March until just quite recently, it's mostly been drones, except for Israel. When Israel's been attacked, it's been very heavily with ballistic missiles. But what you're seeing now, that's just in the last week, is you're starting to see the use of ballistic missiles. You're seeing the use of cruise missiles. These are these sea-skimming missiles here, and they're being used against multiple targets. So the full arsenal that Iran has, the full range of the arsenal, It appears to be fully there, stocked very well, and they're showing no signs of running out of ammo. If anybody's running out of ammo, it might be America running out of interceptors to shoot things down, but we don't know that as a fact. And I think that what you're seeing is Iran has been highly intelligent about how it has deployed its missiles.
Trump said they have no navy, it's been knocked out. They have no air force, that's been knocked out. They have no air detection, that's been knocked out. Their radar has been knocked out. And just about everything's been knocked out. Virtually everything they have has been knocked out. He said that on Truth Social in May 2026. If everything has been knocked out, then how come there's no safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz? How come this weekend we saw more Americans tragically die because of Iranian attacks?
Because what they have left, we can't knock out, and is plenty to do the damage. That's the fundamental problem. We took out the easy stuff to hit. They didn't need it in order to seize control of Hormuz and keep Hormuz and start to defend themselves against more aggressive pressure. And the bottom line is that it's very difficult, if not impossible, to eliminate that capability. We would do it in a heartbeat if we could right away.
Explain to me in just simple terms why it's so difficult to remove that capability. You know, I was looking at this picture here, which shows the size of a drone relative to another object, which
and
is a car. So I guess there were two questions, which is like, where do they hide these, and how easy it is it to make one of these drones?
So they hide those drones, Stephen, everywhere. Okay. They're in drone caverns, they're in warehouses, they're everywhere. They could be, so that drone, just to kind of give you a sense here, would easily fit in this room. But the reason this is so difficult is notice how small that is here, that drone, compared to the scale of where it could be. And this is what I really want to show you, because this is, I think, the hardest part to explain to people as I'm talking in whatever format I'm talking, is it's the scale of eliminating the drone and missile threat is much bigger than people realize, because they're hearing measurements. Well, we've destroyed X% and Y%. And that's why you're getting the question. But if you look at this map, this is where these drones, these Shahed 136, could literally be anywhere in this radius, 500-mile area. And notice how huge this area is. This area like this is bigger than California. It's 1.5 times the size of California.
So I guess it's like trying to find a truck in California.
It's like trying to find a truck in California. These little things here are the Shahed drones.
Yeah.
Okay. And what we're doing in this area, which is mountainous, so this is why we have a three-dimensional, it's not just a two-dimensional problem, it's a three-dimensional problem.
We'll show some of these visuals on screen now, just to show what the terrain where they're hiding these drones might be like.
They could be anywhere in these mountains. There's all kinds. And if we kind of imagine this as a visual, so this is the general problem here we have, which is just this stuff could be anywhere. And now these are the drones, and this is the terrain that the drones are going to hide in. And notice I've just sprinkled some here, but now I'm going to cover these up with more terrain. And notice you can't see those drones anymore. And now I'm going to put in some more drones somewhere else. And now we're going to put another layer in, and this is again, it's the three-dimensional part of the problem, meaning hard to find from the air. Now, if I get my people out and I start going in, now I could start to dig them out. But let's just keep doing this for a while. So now I'm putting in another, say, 20 drones, and I'm going to cover it yet again. And then I'm going to put in another set of drones, and I'm covering it yet again.
I guess you could put all the drones in there and you would still be able to cover them.
You would, yes, but you wouldn't do it you do it in layers. So they're going to make it so that if you find one, you're going to have to work really hard. You have to get them drone by drone by drone, or at least in clusters of them.
I guess also an important point of context is they're also making new ones this whole time.
Exactly. So our estimates that we have leaked from the Pentagon are in April. That's months ago. These drones, they were making 55,000 a year and giving them to Russia. So just think about that. That's thousands every single month. Why haven't they made another 5,000 or 10,000 drones since April? If you want this to open, So let me
The Strait of Hormuz.
the Strait of Hormuz. So now let me just explain. So this is our problem. If you want the Strait of Hormuz to open, it's not good enough to say, oh, look, I've found like dozens or hundreds of these drones. You've got to persuade the shipping companies that their ships are safe. They don't obey orders from the Pentagon. You can't order the shippers to go through.
Because the ships are expensive.
The ships are expensive,
How
and the
expensive?
crews don't want to die. Oh, in the many millions. Millions and millions of dollars. I don't know the exact amount of these tankers, but each tanker will carry between 700,000 and over 1 million barrels of oil. And so they have quite and you can do the math right there to see how much each ship is worth carrying that much oil.
I was looking at the cost here. It says when you combine a brand new vessel with a full tank of oil, a single tank crossing the Strait of Hormuz is a floating asset worth 300 million.
Oh, wow. See, I didn't,
And that's not even-
I learned something from you every time.
And that's not even the lives on board, which again are going to cause an insurance problem, but also no one wants people to die.
Well, and they don't want to die. So you're going to have mutant. They're not going to. So this is why you're seeing more ships leaving than you're seeing ships come in. And the ships that are coming in are very heavily coming to Iran's ports. That's one of the reasons President Trump put the blockade back on. It's because what happened here is the MOU, this whole idea is not opening up the Strait of Hormuz. It's not preventing what's going to come in the next few weeks, maybe month, which is the world economic crisis. We are knocking on the door of what President Trump told us he was trying to avoid, which is the world literally running out of oil. And just today, before we started, the Houthis, which big ally of Iran. So just to come back here and re-show the map, remember I said that once the Strait of Hormuz became shut down, there was 2 million of barrels coming out every day through, for the UAE, coming out through Fujairah, and then 4 to 5 million coming out from Saudi Arabian oil, going out to the Red Sea. And this is the port there at the Red Sea. Well, the Houthis have just shut this down literally today.
Oh, really?
Literally before we came on. It happened about 6 hours ago. This has been escalating for several weeks. Iran's been asking for this. This is part of the general escalation that we're seeing.
Okay, so we've got the Strait of Hormuz closed. We've got the Houthis closing
The Red Sea.
so there's no oil flowing through there.
Yeah.
So are we on the verge of an economic crisis if things don't change quickly?
Yes. This is literally the nightmare scenario that we've been worrying about, and the reason is this. Go back and let's think about this from the 20 million barrels of oil that was going through the Strait of Hormuz. So when Iran gained control of the Strait of Hormuz, what happened immediately is the Saudi Arabia and the UAE started to bypass Hormuz with 7 million barrels a day. So that means only 13 million at issue, right? That's helpful. The next is the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, the United States. And we started to release about 5 or 6 million barrels a week through the strategic oil.
When?
We started to do this. It's right around the middle of March. I can't remember the exact date, but notice that you put a big dent in that. And so that's one of the reasons the oil markets did not go crazy right away.